He moved into his best friend's house to save money, and 15 days later he walked out with a broken neck and a lawsuit that ended their friendship. John Matthews hadn't planned on it coming to this. He was broke, between jobs, drowning in bills, and out of options. When he called Mark, his best friend since childhood, he didn't even expect him to say yes. "Just for a month," John had pleaded over the phone. "I'll cover something for rent. I just need a roof." On the other end of the line, Mark hesitated. John could hear the silent stretch, could picture him glancing at his wife Kelly in the background. "She's not going to like it," Mark muttered. "I'll keep to myself. I'll pay. You won't even notice I'm there." Another pause, then a sigh. "All right. We'll draw up a simple lease. Don't make me regret it." For John, it felt like a lifeline. A friend stepping in where no one else would. A place to land while he got his life back on track. But it wasn't charity. Mark insisted on paperwork, a rental agreement at a fraction of market price, but an agreement all the same. "If you're staying here, it's business, not a favor," he'd said firmly. John had signed without hesitation. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. John kept his head down, paid on time, even tried to help out, taking out the trash, fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. Mark's wife still looked at him with tight-lipped suspicion, but Mark himself seemed content enough. The garage door had been a problem long before John moved in. Everyone in the house knew it. It screeched whenever it rolled, shuddered like it might break free from its tracks, and more than once it froze halfway down, leaving Mark cursing under his breath as he yanked at the chain. "You should get that fixed," Kelly had told him more than once. Yeah, Mark brushed it off. "I'll call someone next week." But next week never came. On the 15th morning of John's stay, he carried a bag of laundry into the garage. The button for the door was right there on the wall. He pressed it without thinking, same as he'd done a dozen times before. The motor groaned, metal screeched. He stepped forward, head ducking slightly under the rising door. Then it happened. The track jolted, the chain slipped, and the heavy steel door came down with a violent crash, straight onto the back of his neck. The sound was sickening, like a baseball bat against bone. John crumpled to the concrete, the bag of laundry spilling beside him. His hands clawed instinctively at the door, but his body wouldn't move. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one worse than the last. "John!" Mark's voice shouted, panicked. He and Kelly ran into the garage. Mark grabbed at the door, straining to lift it. Kelly screamed, "Don't move him! Call 911. The minutes dragged like hours. John's vision blurred, the edges going dark. He felt Kelly's hands pressing a towel under his chin, heard Mark cursing into the phone. "He's not breathing right. Get Hugh fast." By the time paramedics arrived, John's pulse was fading. They strapped his head, fitted a collar around his neck, and loaded him into the ambulance. He caught a glimpse of Mark's face, ashen, terrified as the door slammed shut. At the hospital, doctors worked for hours. Against the odds, John survived, but the damage was done, a fractured vertebra, nerve trauma. The prognosis, months of recovery, limited mobility, and a long stretch without work. Lying in his hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, John tried to move his fingers. They twitched weakly. He swallowed hard, pain radiating through every muscle. Mark visited once. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, hands stuffed in his pockets. "You're lucky to be alive," Mark said quietly. John's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Lucky? I can't even sit up." Mark shifted, eyes down. I'll see what I can do to help." But the help never came. Weeks passed. Bills stacked up. John's savings drained. Mark's wife stopped answering his calls. And every time John replayed that morning, one thought burned hotter than the pain in his neck. That door didn't just fall. It was waiting to fall. And Mark knew it. The realization twisted like a knife. This wasn't just an accident. It was neglect. And if Mark wouldn't take responsibility as a friend, then John would make him take it as a landlord. The next step wouldn't be another phone call. It would be a lawsuit. At first, John didn't want to believe it would come to lawyers. He thought Mark would step up, the way a friend should. Lying in the hospital bed, bills piling on his nightstand, he called Mark one evening. "Mark, I just got the statement. The surgery alone is $70,000. Physical therapy's another 20. I need help." There was a pause. Then Mark's voice clipped. "John, I'm sorry, but you knew that door was messed up. You've seen me struggle with it 100 times. You shouldn't have been standing under it. That was careless." John sat up as much as the brace on his neck allowed. "Careless? I trusted you. That's your house. You should have fixed it." On the other end, silence. Venna muttered, "I can't carry this. Not my fault." A week later, Kelly came to the hospital instead of Mark. Her words cut sharper than the IV needle in John's arm. "We let you live there for next to nothing." Mark wanted to say no. I was the one who said, "Fine, he's your friend, give him a chance. And this is how you repay us? By blaming us for your accident?" John's voice cracked. "I didn't ask for this. I need help." Her eyes narrowed. "You need to take responsibility. We're not your parents, John. You can't fall apart and expect us to pick up the pieces." She turned and walked out, heels clicking against the linoleum. John felt the weight in his chest sink lower than the brace around his neck. For days, he wrestled with it, replaying their words. Maybe it was his fault. Maybe he shouldn't have stood under the door. But then his lawyer, an old acquaintance who stopped by to visit, looked at the lease agreement and shook his head. "John, listen to me. You're not just some freeloader. You signed a rental contract. Even if it was cheap, you paid. That makes you a tenant, not a guest. And when you're a tenant, the landlord has obligations. If they knew about that door and didn't fix it, that's negligence." John stared at him. "You think I should sue my best friend?" The lawyer's tone was steady. "If you'd done the right thing as a friend, you wouldn't need me. But as a landlord, he failed you. The court won't see friendship. They'll see a contract, and an injury worth hundreds of thousands." That night, John made the decision. He called Mark one last time. "I'm filing." "You left me no choice." Mark's response was instant, bitter. "Go ahead. You think you're the victim? The court will see it for what it is, you screwing over your best friend." John gritted his teeth. "No, Mark. The court will see the truth. You put me in a death trap and called it a home." The line went dead. The next morning, the paperwork was filed. What had begun as an act of friendship, a cheap lease to help a friend in need, had now become a legal battlefield, where every memory of laughter and loyalty would be dragged into the harsh light of the courtroom. The courtroom was tense before the first word was spoken. The rows of wooden benches creaked as people shifted, whispering about the case that had turned two lifelong friends into bitter enemies. At the front, John Matthews sat stiff in a brace that held his neck upright, his lawyer Daniel Klein leaning close with a quiet hand on his shoulder. Across the aisle, Mark Collins looked grim, his wife Kelly beside him, their attorney Paul Reynolds rifling through a stack of notes with sharp, deliberate motions. The bailiff's command brought silence. "All rise!" Judge Baird entered, her expression stern. She took her seat, eyes sweeping the room. "This court is now in session. We are here for Matthews versus Collins. Counsel, proceed with opening statements." John's lawyer, the lease agreement. Klein rose, buttoned his jacket, and stepped forward. His tone was steady but carried weight. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a story about friendship. It is a story about duty. My client, Mr. H.A.C. Matthews, was not a guest in Mr. Collins' home. He was a tenant. He paid rent under a signed lease agreement. That makes Mr. Collins not just a friend, but a landlord. And as a landlord, he was responsible for keeping the property safe." He held up a document. "Here is the lease, signed by both parties. It clearly establishes that relationship." He handed it to the clerk, who delivered it to the judge. Klein continued, "We will show that Mr. Collins knew about the danger of his garage door. He ignored it. And because of that negligence, the door fell and nearly killed Mr. Matthews. The result was a broken neck, permanent spinal damage, and medical costs that will follow him for the rest of his life. At the end of this trial, we will ask you to find responsibility where it belongs, with Mr. Collins." John lowered his eyes. Even hearing his injuries listed aloud made his chest tighten. Mark's lawyer, blaming carelessness. Reynolds was quick to his feet. His voice was sharper, fast-paced, almost confrontational. "This case is about personal responsibility. Mr. Matthews was well aware of that garage door. He saw it malfunction many times. He admits it screeched, hesitated, and yet he chose to stand directly beneath it. That was his decision. That was his mistake. Mr. Collins extended generosity to a friend in need. He offered housing at a fraction of the price. And how does Mr. Matthews repay that kindness? By dragging him into court. We will prove this was not neglect. This was carelessness. And carelessness should not cost a man $380,000. Mark nodded, his arms folded tight across his chest. Kelly squeezed his arm, her eyes sharp. "The doctor's testimony. Plaintiff calls Dr. Rachel Turner to the stand," Klein announced. A woman in her 40s wearing a navy blazer approached the witness stand. She was sworn in and took her seat. Klein stepped closer. "Dr. Turner, what is your profession?" "I'm an orthopedic surgeon at Boston Medical Center. I specialize in spinal injuries." "And were you the attending physician when Mr. Matthews was admitted on March 14th of this year?" "Yes, I was." "Please describe his condition when he arrived." Dr. Turner's voice was calm, clinical, but her words hit like bricks. He had sustained a cervical spine fracture, specifically a break at the C5 vertebra. He also suffered a herniated disc in his lower spine from the impact. When paramedics brought him in, his breathing was shallow, pulse unstable. We stabilized him and performed emergency surgery that same night. Klein nodded. "How serious were these injuries?" "Life-threatening. A fracture in that area of the neck can sever the spinal cord. If it had shifted further, he could have been paralyzed from the shoulders down, or worse, stopped breathing altogether. He was extremely fortunate to survive." The courtroom murmured. John clenched his jaw, staring at the table. "And his long-term prognosis?" Klein pressed. Dr. Turner folded her hands. "He will never regain full mobility. The vertebra was fused during surgery, which limits his range of motion permanently. He will also live with chronic pain from the herniated disc. Physical therapy can improve his condition, but he will never return to heavy labor or full-time construction work as he once did. The damage is permanent." Klein let that sink in before asking, Doctor, in your professional opinion, could this injury have been prevented if the garage door had been properly maintained? Yes, she said firmly. A functioning door does not collapse suddenly. This was a preventable accident. No further questions. Cross-examination by Mark's lawyer Reynolds stood, adjusting his tie. Dr. Turner, you said Mr. Matthews was lucky to survive, correct? Yes, and you would agree that stepping under a garage door while it's in motion carries risk, even if it's functioning properly. Dr. Turner frowned. Minimal risk, yes, but not catastrophic. Unless the door is defective. So if Mr. Matthews had exercised more caution, waited until the door was fully open, this wouldn't have happened? Klein rose. Objection. Speculative. Barrett. Sustained. Rephrase. Reynolds leaned forward. Doctor, is it possible that Mr. Matthews's actions contributed to the accident? Dr. Turner's voice was cool. It is possible he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but the severity of his injury stemmed from the door's failure. Without that failure, there would have been no accident. Reynolds gave a tight smile. So we can agree his choices mattered too. Dr. Turner didn't flinch, only because the door was unsafe to begin with. Nothing further. The judge dismissed Dr. Turner. As she stepped down, John exhaled slowly. The brace around his neck felt tighter than usual. His body ached, but not as much as the betrayal sitting across from him. Barrett glanced at the clock. We will continue with additional testimony after recess. Court stands adjourned until 2 p.m. The gavel cracked. The sound echoed in John's chest. As people rose, John and Mark's eyes met for the first time all day. For a moment, the years of childhood sleepovers, shared beers, and inside jokes flickered between them. Then it was gone. The next round would decide everything. When court reconvened that afternoon, the air felt heavier, as though everyone in the room knew the next few hours would draw a line through years of friendship. Judge Barrett adjusted her robe, tapped her pen once against the bench, and said flatly, Mr. Klein, you may continue. The final push. John's lawyer Klein stood, shoulders squared. He paced slowly before the jury. You've heard the facts. You've seen the lease agreement. You've heard from Dr. Turner that this was not a freak accident, but a preventable one. The defense wants you to believe Mr. Matthews should have been more careful, but caution doesn't fix broken tracks. Personal responsibility doesn't repair a defective door. Only a landlord can do that. Mr. Collins had knowledge of the danger, had the ability to fix it, and failed. That failure nearly killed a man. And it wasn't just a man, it was his best friend. He paused, his voice softening. John Matthews trusted his friend with a roof over his head. That trust was repaid with a broken neck. If you believe in accountability, if you believe contracts matter, then the verdict must reflect that. The counterattack. Mark's lawyer Reynolds was quick to rise. He moved with energy, his voice sharper, his pace faster. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not lose sight of the truth. Yes, there was an accident, but accidents happen. Mr. Matthews knew that garage door was faulty. He admits he'd seen a jam and heard it screech, yet he walked under it anyway. That's not negligence, that's recklessness. And now, instead of owning his mistake, he's trying to make his friend pay. Think about the bigger picture. Mr. Collins gave him a place to live when no one else would. He charged him a fraction of rent out of loyalty. And this is the thanks he gets? A lawsuit for hundreds of thousands of dollars? He stopped, leaning on the rail. This case isn't about justice. It's about blame. Don't punish a man for being a friend. Klein stood again, unable to let it sit. Your Honor, permission for rebuttal. Barrett nodded. Mr. Reynolds keeps saying friendship. But friendship ended the moment a contract was signed. Mr. Matthews paid rent. That made him a tenant. And tenants have rights. Would you tell any other tenant in Boston if your ceiling caves in and breaks your neck, it's your fault for standing there? No. You'd hold the landlord accountable. And that's what we're asking here. Reynolds shot back, his tone rising. The difference is Mr. Matthews knew the risk. He'd seen it with his own eyes. A landlord can't babysit a grown man every second. Klein's voice cut through him. A landlord must provide a safe home. That's the law. He ignored it. And now my client pays the price every single day. Enough, Judge Barrett barked. The room fell silent. John speaks. Klein surprised everyone by calling his client to the stand. John moved slowly, the brace on his neck obvious, his steps halting. Sworn in, he sat down, gripping the armrest. Mr. Matthews, Klein said gently, tell the court how this injury has affected your life. John swallowed. Before, I was working construction. Long days, heavy lifting. I loved it. Now, I can't even pick up my daughter without pain shooting down my spine. I can't sleep more than 3 hours. Every time I turn my head, it feels like knives in my neck. He paused, his voice cracking. I trusted Mark. I thought if something was wrong with the house, he'd take care of it. That door wasn't an accident waiting to happen. It was an accident waiting to kill. And it almost did. Klein, what do you want from this court? John looked at the jury. Just fairness. My bills are crushing me. My life will never be the same. I can't get my health back. But I shouldn't lose everything because my best friend didn't fix his door. The room was silent. Reynolds declined to cross-examine. Klein, negligence isn't about intent. It's about responsibility. Mr. Collins had both the knowledge and the duty. He failed. The law requires you to hold him accountable. Reynolds, this is a tragedy, yes, but tragedy doesn't equal liability. Don't turn generosity into punishment. Both sat down. Judge Barrett removed her glasses and looked over the courtroom. Her voice was clear, each word striking. This court has reviewed the evidence. The lease establishes a landlord-tenant relationship. Testimony confirms the garage door was defective. Medical testimony proves the injury is permanent. The defense argues Mr. Matthews acted carelessly. The court does not deny he made a choice, but the law is clear. A landlord must maintain safe premises. That duty was breached. Accordingly, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Emball, Mr. C. Matthews. Damages are awarded in the amount of $380,000. The gavel struck. John exhaled, shoulders trembling. Relief mixed with sorrow. He hadn't won back his health, and he hadn't won back his friend, but at least the law had seen him. Across the aisle, Mark's face went pale. Kelly whispered something, but he didn't answer. He just stared at John, eyes burning, as if betrayal cut deeper than the money ever would. For a moment, neither moved. Two men who had shared childhood dreams, now separated by a verdict. John rose slowly, leaning on his cane. He turned once toward Mark. Their eyes met. There was no victory there, only silence. As he left the courtroom, John thought of all the nights they'd laughed together, all the promises made, and how a door, a contract, and a choice not to fix it had shattered it all. Mark sat frozen long after the gavel's echo faded. $380,000. The number repeated in his head like a drum beat. He clenched his jaw, but the anger rising in his chest wasn't aimed at the judge. It was at John. How could he, after everything? He remembered the night he signed that lease, convincing Kelly it was the right thing. He's my best friend, he had said. He needs us. Now that decision had gutted them. Beside him, Kelly's hands trembled in her lap. Outwardly, she looked composed, lips pressed tight, but inside her stomach knotted. I warned him, she thought bitterly. I said this would end badly. And now here we are, our savings, our home, everything we worked for, bleeding into John's hands. Yet beneath the bitterness, guilt gnawed at her. She had seen the door shudder and slam. She had told Mark to fix it. If only she had insisted harder. If only he had listened. Mark's mind wasn't on repairs or savings. It was on betrayal. He replayed all the beers shared on the porch, the late-night talks, the times he'd defended John when others walked away. Friends don't drag each other into court, he told himself. But another voice whispered, friends don't ignore danger that can kill you. Kelly glanced at him, reading the storm in his eyes. She wanted to reach for his hand, to steady him, but she couldn't. The verdict hadn't just cost them money. It had cracked something deeper, trust in his judgment, trust in their choices. As the courtroom emptied, Mark finally stood. His legs felt heavy, his chest hollow. Kelly rose beside him, her face pale. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. In their silence, both knew the truth. The law had delivered its verdict, but the real sentence was the weight they would carry long after the money was paid. Shame, anger, and the ghost of a friendship they could never reclaim. Mark sat frozen long after the gavel's echo faded. $380,000. The number repeated in his head like a drumbeat. He clenched his jaw, but the anger rising in his chest wasn't aimed at the judge. It was at John. How could he, after everything? He remembered the night he signed that lease, convincing Kelly it was the right thing. He's my best friend, he had said. He needs us. Now that decision had gutted them. Beside him, Kelly's hands trembled in her lap. Outwardly, she looked composed, lips pressed tight, but inside her stomach knotted. I warned him, she thought bitterly. I said this would end badly, and now here we are, our savings, our home, everything we worked for bleeding into John's hands. Yet beneath the bitterness, guilt gnawed at her. She had seen the door shudder and slam. She had told Mark to fix it. If only she had insisted harder. If only he had listened. Mark's mind wasn't on repairs or savings. It was on betrayal. He replayed all the beers shared on the porch, the late-night talks, the times he'd defended John when others walked away. Friends don't drag each other into court, he told himself. But another voice whispered, friends don't ignore danger that can kill you. Kelly glanced at him, reading the storm in his eyes. She wanted to reach for his hand, to steady him, but she couldn't. The verdict hadn't just cost them money. It had cracked something deeper, trust in his judgment, trust in their choices. As the courtroom emptied, Mark finally stood. His legs felt heavy, his chest hollow. Kelly rose beside him, her face pale. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. In their silence, both knew the truth. The law had delivered its verdict, but the real sentence was the weight they would carry long after the money was paid. Shame, anger, and the ghost of a friendship they could never reclaim. John stepped out of the courthouse into the gray afternoon. The chill in the air bit against his skin, but inside he felt nothing. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, yet their noise faded into the background. $380,000. The verdict was his, but it didn't feel like victory. Money could pay bills, cover therapy, maybe keep a roof over his head, but it couldn't buy back the years of trust lost in that courtroom. For a moment, he looked back at the heavy doors. Behind them, Mark and Kelly remained, their lives fractured in a different way. John imagined the silence between them, the blame, the anger. He almost pitied them. Almost. He turned and walked down the steps slowly, each step a reminder of the pain still lodged in his spine. Willie's face, his daughter's smile, flickered in his mind. He would keep going for her. Justice had spoken, but it had left him with a truth harsher than any judgment. In the end, he had won the case and lost his brother, and that was a price no court could measure. What do you think about this case between John and Mark? One man fought for justice, the other claimed it was betrayal. The court decided with the law, but the verdict shattered a lifelong friendship. Was John right to sue his best friend, or should he have let it go for the sake of loyalty? Was Mark careless, or simply unlucky? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you see justice here, or just another tragedy of trust lost?